My mother refused me $900 at the hospital and said poverty was my choice. Not knowing I had a $54 ticket in my pocket and was testing them all, your poverty is a choice. Figure it out, my mother said when I asked her for $900 from a freezing hospital waiting room. I stayed silent, with a $54 million lottery ticket tucked inside my jacket. And for the first time in my life, I finally saw who they really were. The chair beneath me was cracked down the middle, and every time I shifted my weight, the vinyl pinched the back of my thigh through my jeans. I did not move. I just sat there in the fluorescent half-dark of the hospital waiting room, listening to a vending machine hum in the corner and breathing in the sharp smell of antiseptic that had soaked into the walls for so long it had practically become part of them. It was 11:22 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was not sick. I was not bleeding. I was not waiting for a doctor or a diagnosis or anyone at all. I was sitting in that plastic chair because I needed somewhere quiet and anonymous, somewhere no one would look twice at a man sitting alone with his thoughts. And a hospital waiting room at 11 on a weeknight may be the most invisible place in America. Inside my jacket, pressed flat against my chest between my undershirt and my hoodie, was a lottery ticket. $54 million. Cash option. I had checked it 4 times. 3 times on the app, and once at the gas station counter while the attendant, a college kid named Rafi, I remember his name badge clearly, stared at me like I was about to have a medical emergency right there between the Red Bull display and the beef jerky. He had said very quietly, "Sir, you need to call someone." And I had said, just as quietly, "Yeah, that's the plan." But standing in that parking lot afterward, with the key in the ignition and the car still not started, I felt something I did not expect. I did not want to call anyone. Not yet. I wanted to know the truth first, because $54 million has a way of changing what people say to you. And I had spent 34 years not quite knowing what people would say if the money were removed. Tonight, I was going to find out. My name is Daniel Mercer. For the past 6 years, I have been a freelance technical writer. Contracts, manuals, user documentation, the invisible plumbing of the corporate world that everyone uses and no one credits. I drive a 2017 Honda Accord with 140,000 miles on it. I have a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that has not finished deciding whether it is gentrifying or declining. I eat well enough, sleep well enough, and by most measures, I am completely, unmistakably, deliberately ordinary. This was a choice. Not poverty. I make a decent living, but the visible markers of wealth, the LinkedIn signaling, the Tesla, the dinner reservations at restaurants where the menu does not show prices, I had quietly stopped performing all of that about 4 years ago. It happened after my father died, when I watched my family spend his funeral arguing about the estate before we had even finished lowering his casket. My family. Let me tell you about my family. My mother, Catherine Mercer, is 61 years old and has lived her entire adult life as if she is the protagonist of a social performance, and the rest of us are merely supporting characters. She plays bridge. She lunches. She is on the planning committee for no fewer than 3 charitable organizations, none of which she has ever volunteered for directly. She will tell you within 4 minutes of meeting you that her daughter Vanessa is a real estate broker and her son Marcus is a regional sales director, and then she will pause just long enough before mentioning me that you understand the pause is the point. Vanessa, my sister, is 38. She has my mother's talent for presentation and none of her subtlety. She drives a BMW she cannot afford, wears a watch she financed, and has been, for as long as I can remember, in quiet financial catastrophe while projecting the image of effortless success. She and I were close once, back when we were young enough that money did not matter yet. We are not close now. Marcus, my brother, is 41. He is the kind of man who uses the word leverage in casual conversation and means it. He made regional sales director by being genuinely good at his job and completely willing to be someone you do not want to sit beside at dinner. 6-figure salary, big house in the suburbs, the right shoes, the right car, the right wife. Except that last part, as I was about to discover, was more complicated than it looked. Diana is Marcus's wife. She has been a registered nurse for 9 years. She is also the only person in my family I have always unreservedly trusted, which I think says everything about all of us that needs to be said. I had won the lottery on a Saturday. By Tuesday night, sitting in that hospital chair, I had spent 3 days doing nothing but thinking about what I was about to do. I had 50 acres of land my father left me out in a county that everyone in my family referred to as the middle of nowhere, in a tone that made nowhere sound like an insult to middleness. My mother had mentioned twice in the past year that Vanessa thought we should consolidate the estate assets. Marcus had mentioned once that holding undeveloped land was a tax burden with no upside. I had nodded and said I would think about it, and I had thought about it, and then I had done nothing, because something about the pressure felt wrong in a way I could not articulate. I was going to call in a favor from a real estate attorney on Wednesday. But first, I needed to know who I was dealing with. Not as a landowner, not as a future multimillionaire. As Daniel, the one with no upside. The freelancer. The ordinary one. So I composed my face into something between panic and embarrassment, took a breath, and dialed my mother. It rang 4 times. The 5th ring had barely started when she picked up, and I could hear the restaurant before I heard her voice. Glasses clinking. A low swell of conversation. The specific register of a room full of people spending money comfortably. Daniel. Not a question, not warmth, a punctuation mark? Mom, I said, letting my voice come out thinner than usual, a little breathless. I'm at the ER. They think it's my appendix. They need $900 up front before they'll admit me. Silence. Not the silence of shock. Not the silence of someone reaching for her purse, or her phone, or her voice. A long, slow silence, like a sigh that had decided to become a pause first. Daniel. Same tone. Same punctuation mark. Do you have any idea what time it is? I'm at the club with your sister. We're finalizing her anniversary party. Mom, they said if it ruptures, your poverty, she said. And I want to be precise here because precision matters. She did not say it cruelly. She said it the way you state a fact about weather, or traffic, or something that simply is. Your poverty is a choice, Daniel. You chose to freelance instead of building a real career. This is the consequence of that choice. Figure it out. And then she hung up. I sat with the phone against my ear for another 3 seconds, listening to the line go quiet. Then I lowered it into my lap, looked at the linoleum floor, and felt something in my chest go very, very still. Not hurt, past hurt, something more like confirmation. The call had ended at 11:31 p.m. Before it ended, she had laughed. I want to be accurate. It was not a full laugh. It was a short exhalation that carried amusement in it. The sound you make when someone has asked you something slightly absurd. Then the line went dead. I sat there in the cracked vinyl chair, listened to the silence, and thought, there it is. I called Marcus next. It went to voicemail after 1 ring. Not a missed call, a deliberate redirect. 3 seconds later, an automated text appeared on my screen. Closing a deal. Stop calling. I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Stop calling. Not, I'll call you back. Not, is everything okay? Stop calling. I had one more call to make, but I almost did not make it. Almost. I had sat up and actually started to put my jacket on when the emergency room doors slid open on a gust of cold November rain, and Diana came through them. She was still in her nursing scrubs from a 12-hour shift. Her hair was wet. She had driven 2 hours through a storm on a Tuesday night because she had seen Marcus's phone when my call came in, and she had not asked questions. She had gotten in her car. She ran across the waiting room and shoved a damp envelope into my hands. Her fingers were cold. The envelope held cash. $300. The kind of stack that means someone went to an ATM and took out everything it would give them. It's everything I had liquid, she said, already pulling out her phone to open a banking app. I've got $500 on my card. Put the rest on it and go. Daniel. Before they changed their mind about admitting you, I closed my hands around the envelope and looked at her. Why do you have a $500 credit limit? You're an RN. She looked away. A specific kind of looking away. Not evasion, but the involuntary flinch of someone who has gotten very good at redirecting certain conversations. It's complicated, she said. Tell me. She told me in pieces, standing in that fluorescent waiting room with rain drying in her hair, and each piece was worse than the last. Marcus received her paychecks. Not jointly. Not into a shared account. Into his account. Period. Her direct deposit had been set up at the start of their marriage, when she had been newer to the relationship, and he had framed it as simplifying their finances. She received $100 a week for groceries. $100 a week for a registered nurse with 9 years of experience. He tracked her car's mileage on weekends. He did not just notice it. He checked it. He checked the odometer against where she had said she was going. She had told him that night she was picking up an extra shift. If he looked at the mileage tomorrow, there would be a 4-hour gap she could not account for. She touched the ring on her right hand while she was telling me this. A gold ring, slightly worn on the inner edge. Her grandmother's. There's a pawn shop on Route 9, she said. I passed it on the way here. They were still open. I thought if the card wasn't enough, stop, I said. It's fine. It's just a... Diana, stop. She had driven 2 hours through a storm in scrubs after a 12-hour shift to pawn her grandmother's ring for a man she thought was sick and the man who had promised to love her checked her mileage on weekends. I pushed the envelope back into her hands. I told her my insurance had just come through, that there had been a miscommunication at the front desk, and everything was covered. I watched her face do the complicated thing faces do when relief and doubt arrive at the same time. You're sure? I'm sure. Go home before the storm gets worse. Text me when you're there. She left. I watched her brake lights disappear into the rain. Then I walked to my car and sat in the driver's seat for a long time, with my hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine, just listening to the rain on the roof. $54 million, and I finally knew exactly who deserved what. I called Richard Holt on Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. Richard Holt is one of maybe 40 people in the country who does what he does at the level he does it. And what he does is a combination of wealth management, law, estate litigation, and forensic financial investigation. The people who hire him usually describe him as aggressive. The people on the other end of him usually describe him with words I will not repeat here. He has an office on the 43rd floor of a building in Midtown Manhattan that has no signage in the lobby. His firm's name is not on the building directory. His clients find him through referrals, and his website exists primarily to make sure he cannot be accused of operating secretly. I found him through my college roommate, who works in estate law in Connecticut and once described Richard as the person you call when you find out the house is on fire and you want to know who lit the match. I flew to New York that afternoon. I signed a retainer the next morning. By Friday at 5 p.m., Richard's team had completed a preliminary financial and legal review of my family's situation. What they found was worse than anything I had imagined sitting in that hospital waiting room. The first findings were about Vanessa Mercer Colton, $247,000 in outstanding credit card debt across 6 accounts. No real estate transactions closed in 14 months. An IRS examination pending for possible fraud relating to reported commissions in 2022 and 2023. Specifically, commissions reported on deals that may not have reached final closing. Separately, a development company called Arrowhead Infrastructure Partners LLC had approached Vanessa 11 months earlier about an easement and possible acquisition of my 50 acres. She had responded by representing herself as the estate executor with authority to negotiate. She had no such authority. They had offered $8 million. She had told me the land was worthless. $8 million. She had been negotiating an $8 million sale of my land while I sat in my apartment writing user manuals for industrial software. She had told me, twice to my face, that holding onto the property was sentimental and probably a net loss. I remember both conversations clearly now. The way she had tilted her head a little when she said it, like she was sharing something difficult with someone she would rather not have to explain things to. Richard had more. The next findings were about Marcus Mercer. In 2021, Marcus had executed a refinancing agreement on the property at 114 Clearwater Drive, the home owned by Catherine Mercer. The refinancing was in the amount of $800,000. The signature of Catherine Mercer on the refinancing documents did not match her verified signature on file with the original 2003 mortgage. A forensic handwriting analyst retained by Holt & Associates, Dr. Patricia Vance, certified by the American Board of Forensic Document Examiners, had provided a preliminary opinion that the signature was likely not authentic. Furthermore, the property at 114 Clearwater Drive had entered default proceedings in March 2024. Foreclosure had been completed in September 2024. Certified notices sent to the property address had been intercepted before Catherine Mercer received them. The property was acquired by Fulton County at auction in October 2024. Catherine Mercer currently believes she owned her home. She did not. I read that last line 3 times. She did not. My mother had spent the last 3 years living in a house that her son had mortgaged out from under her to cover gambling debts she had no idea existed. She was hosting book clubs and anniversary parties and playing the proud mother. And the foundation of all of it, the physical house she lived in, was already gone. My hands were not shaking. I want to be honest about that. There is a point past which things are too large for shaking hands. My hands were very still. I read the documents a second time from the beginning, and then I looked at Richard Holt across his desk, with his view of Midtown Manhattan behind him, and I said very quietly, "What can I do?" He smiled, just slightly, the way a chess player smiles when someone has finally asked the right question. "Several things," he said. "Let me walk you through them." The first thing I did was call Arrowhead Infrastructure Partners directly. I spoke with their acquisitions director, a man named Carter Webb, who had an hour's worth of patience with me once I established that I was the actual title holder of the 50 acres and that I could provide documentation to that effect within 24 hours. He had, in his own professional way, already suspected something was irregular about his dealings with Vanessa. He said this carefully, In the language of someone who had consulted with legal counsel before taking the call. We negotiated for 3 days. Richard handled the final terms. The land sold for $10 million, $2 million more than Vanessa had negotiated, because the development timeline had accelerated, and the company needed the easement resolved before a bond offering in December. The closing happened on a Thursday morning. The wire transfer arrived in my account before noon. The second thing I did was pull the county auction records for 114 Clearwater Drive. Fulton County had acquired the property at foreclosure auction in October for $310,000, well below its assessed value, as foreclosure properties tend to go. I contacted the county's asset management office, which was staffed by a woman named Martha Gill, who had been handling county property transactions for 22 years and had the specific weary efficiency of someone who had seen everything twice and most things 3 times. I purchased the property for $340,000 cash, with a contingency that the transaction remain non-public for 30 days, pending a family legal matter. Martha Gill did not ask questions. Martha Gill processes about 60 of these a year. The third thing I did was call my brother's employer. I did not call to report him. I called to ask, carefully and without identifying myself, whether their benefits program included an employee assistance program with financial counseling services, the kind with a confidential hotline. It did. I noted the number. I was going to need it later. Richard, meanwhile, had referred Diana to a colleague, an attorney named Sasha Park, who specializes in financial abuse cases within marriages, and had, in Richard's words, an extraordinary record and absolutely no patience for this kind of situation. I called Diana and told her, without telling her everything, that I had found some things, that I thought she should talk to someone, and that I had a name. Diana was quiet for a long time after I gave her Sasha Park's contact information. "Daniel," she finally said. "How bad is it?" "Talk to Sasha first," I said. "Then call me." She called me 2 hours after her first consultation. She did not say much. Just, "Okay, I understand. What do you need me to do?" I told her to be at a meeting on Monday. I gave her the address of Vanessa's rented conference room. I told her to dress professionally and to say nothing until I said something first. She said okay. I said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For the hospital. For all of it." "Daniel." "No," I said. "That's not why I'm saying it." Vanessa had chosen the conference room herself. I will give her that. She had taste. It was a rented space in a business center downtown. The kind of place that projects seriousness without the overhead of an actual office. Glass table, leather chairs, a credenza with a coffee setup, a whiteboard with nothing on it. The kind of room meant to make the person across the table feel like they are in a negotiation they have already lost. There were 4 people already seated when I arrived. Vanessa, Marcus, my mother, and a man I did not recognize, who turned out to be Vanessa's attorney, a local real estate lawyer named Brent Falcone, who had the look of someone who had been told this was going to be a simple matter. Diana walked in behind me. The reaction to Diana was interesting. Marcus went very still. My mother's expression shifted in a way that suggested she was recalibrating some assumption. Vanessa recovered fastest. She has always been the fastest at recovering, and she gestured to the chairs across the table with the practiced grace of someone who had run enough closings to make the motion automatic. "Good," Vanessa said. "Let's make this quick. Daniel, the quitclaim deed is right there. We've simplified the estate paperwork as much as possible. You sign, we handle everything, and you walk away clean." She slid a document across the glass table. A quitclaim deed for the 50 acres, already notarized on her end. There was a yellow sticky tab with an arrow pointing to the signature line, as though I might need help finding it. I looked at the document. I looked at her. I looked at my mother, who was watching me with the particular expression of a woman who believed she was waiting for formalities. I sat down. Diana sat beside me. I folded my hands on the table. "I called the developers myself," I said. "Arrowhead Infrastructure Partners. I spoke with Carter Webb, their acquisitions director. We negotiated directly. The land sold on Thursday. $10 million, cash." The wire cleared the same morning. The room went very quiet. Vanessa's face did something I had not seen it do before. The mask did not fall. Masks like hers are too practiced to fall. But it cracked, just slightly, along the jaw. Her mouth opened and then closed. Brent Falcone looked sideways at her with the expression of a man beginning to suspect his client had not been entirely candid with him. "That's," Vanessa started. "That's not possible. The deal we had with them was contingent on you controlling the estate," I said. "Which you don't. Which you told them you did. Which a forensic attorney has documented in considerable detail, along with the IRS examination and the 6 credit card accounts." She stood up. I do not think she meant to. I think her body made the decision before her mind could stop it. She stood up and then had nowhere to go. So she stood there. I turned to Marcus. He had not moved. He had the stillness of a man who knows a conversation he does not want to have is now unavoidable and is calculating how it arrives. I took the folder from my jacket and placed it in front of my mother. It contained three things: the forensic handwriting analysis from Dr. Patricia Vance, the county foreclosure record for 114 Clearwater Drive, and a copy of the $800,000 refinancing agreement with her signature, her forged signature, at the bottom. My mother is a woman who has never, in my entire life, been uncertain about what to say. She looked at those 3 pages, and she had nothing. Absolutely nothing. She read the first page, then the second. Her hand started to shake, not dramatically, but with the fine tremor of something structural giving way. She looked up at Marcus. Marcus looked at the table. That was the confirmation she needed. And she made a sound I am not going to try to describe because I do not think language is quite right for it. Brent Falcone stood up and said very quietly that he needed to speak with his client privately. He took Vanessa's elbow and guided her toward the door. She went. I think she was grateful for an exit that was not a retreat. And then it was just the 4 of us. Marcus, my mother, Diana, me. Marcus started to explain. He used the word borrowed. He used the phrase intended to make it right. He talked about the gambling the way people talk about it, when they are still deciding whether to call it gambling. A period of some poor financial decisions. A series of cascading setbacks. I had a plan to cover it. He talked for about 90 seconds. Then he ran out of words and sat there. Diana was looking at the middle of the table. Not at him, not at anything. Just holding herself very still in the way that nurses learn, the way you hold yourself when you are managing something that needs to be managed. My mother had collapsed inward, not literally, but in the way people do when something foundational is removed. She composed herself after a while with visible effort. She looked at me, and when her expression settled, it was something I had not quite seen on her face before. It was a request. Not spoken, but built into the architecture of her face. The slight forward lean. The hands not quite reaching. Daniel, she said, and her voice was very different from Tuesday night. Softer. The performance stripped out. Please. You're my son. I have nowhere to go. That house is everything. I have no one else to ask. I looked at her for a long time. I thought about Tuesday night. I thought about the restaurant sounds in the background, the glasses clinking, the patience she had for a sigh before she decided not to have any for a dying son. I thought about the exact cadence of her voice, not angry, not even dismissive, just settled, as though my emergency was a minor administrative problem I needed to resolve on my own. I thought about Diana in the rain. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. I turned the screen toward my mother so she could see the balance. $64 million. My name, the account number, the date. I held it still for a moment, long enough for her to read it twice. Then, I put the phone away. I bought the house, I said, at auction, anonymously. It closed last week. She exhaled, and relief started to form in her face. Then you understand, she started. It's still, I own it, I said. Not you. Me. The relief stopped forming. Daniel, I used her words. The same ones, the same tone. Not cruel. Just settled. As though I were stating a fact about weather. Your poverty is a choice, Mom. You chose to trust a son who forged your name rather than ask hard questions. You chose a club and an anniversary party over a son in a hospital. These are the consequences of those choices. I paused. Figure it out. The room was completely silent. Marcus looked at me, then at the table, then at Diana, who was still looking into the middle distance with that careful, managed stillness. I stood up. Diana stood with me. At the door, I stopped. There was one more thing. Marcus. He looked up. There's an employee assistance program through your HR department. Financial counseling. Confidential hotline. You need to call it. Today. Not for me. Call it because eventually this becomes a criminal matter. And right now it doesn't have to be. He stared at me. I'm giving you a window, I said. It's small. Don't waste it. I held the door for Diana. We walked out through the glass lobby and into the afternoon. 4 months later, Diana and Marcus separated in December. Sasha Park filed the divorce petition with a financial disclosure requirement that, based on the documents Richard's team had assembled, Marcus could not dispute without making things significantly worse for himself. The settlement, finalized in February, returned 9 years of controlled paychecks to Diana in the form of a lump sum that Sasha described as appropriate given the circumstances. Diana was, for the first time in almost a decade, managing her own finances. She texted me a photo of her new bank account, just the number, no caption. I understood what it meant. Marcus called the EAP hotline. I know this because he told me in a voicemail I did not return for 10 days. He is in a program now. I do not know if it will work. I hope it does. He is still my brother. That has not changed, and I do not think it should. Vanessa is working with a debt negotiation service, negotiating with the IRS, and no longer in real estate. She called me once, about 6 weeks after the conference room. She did not apologize exactly, but she said something that was in the neighborhood of it, and I am old enough to know that sometimes the neighborhood is as far as people can get. I told her I hoped things got better. I meant it. My mother is still living in the house on Clearwater Drive. She pays rent to me. It is below market rate, and she does not know that yet. She thinks it is precisely market rate because I asked Richard to calculate what market rate looked like, and then I set it slightly lower. She has not asked about the arrangement, and I have not explained it. I think we both understand that this is, for now, the best we can do. She has not said thank you. I do not think she knows how. I am not sure I need her to. What I needed was the truth. I got it on a Tuesday night in November, in a cracked vinyl chair in a hospital waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and other people's emergencies. I needed to know who would show up. One person did. In the rain, in scrubs, with $300 cash and a grandmother's ring she was willing to lose for someone she loved, without accounting for what she would get in return. The other night, I signed papers on a 3-bedroom house about 6 miles from the hospital where this all started. Good neighborhood, good schools, room for a dog if she ever wants one. Diana is moving in next month. The deed is in her name. She told me it was too much. I told her that was incorrect. I told her the only math that had ever made sense to me was the math of who shows up when you need them. Everything else is just money. And I have enough of that now.